Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Mr. Verzat. This is going to be a demonstration for the 2D design students on how to create your creature feature exercise. Now, as always, refer to your brief that you're given. Your brief outlines the specs, the general reason for why we're doing it, a list of techniques that you'll be assessed on, as well as your turn-in checklists, some tips, and some supplemental materials that I'd like you guys to view if you ever have any trouble remembering some of these techniques. So remember, on the back, you've also got your grading rubric so you can know exactly what you're going to earn. Before we begin the creature exercise, you'll have a sheet where I'd like you to generate just 4 thumbnails. If you want to go further than that, feel free. But these thumbnails, the way this works is very similar to our level 3 creature combination exercise where we fused 2 creatures together. So what I'd like you to do is choose 2 or more creatures to combine together into 1 creature. All right, so what we've got down here are 4 separate sections, and those serve as practice, or kind of think of them as architectural blueprints. These are thumbnail sketches, and thumbnail sketches are small, very quick sketches that are used to kind of get an idea of what you want to do before you commit all of your time to the big piece. In the demo, I used this see-through paper and overlaid directly on top of the gorilla to get the image of the gorilla bird. So let's get started. I've got a couple different animals. I'm going to use a combination of several. I wanted a couple examples of a swan, also an example of the swan's wing. I've got a bobcat kind of a shape here for kind of a cat-like creature. And then for the head, I'm looking at kind of these big pointy ears and also this really creepy lionfish. I'm thinking overall of either an aquatic creature or using the lionfish's fins as a base to build on top of these wings, okay? So maybe it could be an aerial creature. Before you commit to drawing something unique, you need to understand how those parts function. And so I'm going to study first. I need to look at the actual creatures and see what are the parts that make that fish look like a fish. And so, for example, if I look at this kind of fish and I want to use, say, a fish-type head shape, then I need to look at what are the major forms that are in here. So we've got direct and indirect forms, big ones, little ones, the most obvious and in-your-face shapes, and then ones that we might have to imagine that we see in order to get those different shapes. So we have kind of this L-shaped or boot-shaped head. If I were to use that in this animal, how would we go about drawing that? Well, I could draw, like, say, a jelly bean type shape for the bottom and then place a circle on top. But what if you're not very good at drawing? How in the heck do you draw a jelly bean? What indirect shapes can you find in that head? So we could start with something similar to, say, like 2 ovals, right? And then connect them down the middle. You see how his shape kind of curves at kind of a horseshoe shape. And then let's use, say, for this part, it's quite a ways in, so remember to draw in proportion by measuring the form against itself. We could see an oval here, and then we have a gigantic curve this way. And so by understanding these form relationships, we've got 2 ovals. I'm going to rotate this fish head closer to us, so kind of have it come out like that. And again, by understanding foreshortening, we have 2 shapes here. Here's one, here's the second. The one in front, if it's going to come towards us, this one is going to move to the right, this one's going to move to the left, and then we're going to have to exaggerate the angles between those shapes. So let's do that. Those new shapes are going to overlap. Here's where our curve is, and right at the very top of that oval, right here, is where our cylinder is going to be. And looking at our photo ref, I can tell that his eyes are a little further inward than his cheeks. His cheeks kind of come out and then down. So I'm going to stick a cylinder right about there. And I think that's a pretty decent build for this fish. So understanding our form breakdown, there's two ways you can go about the creature feature. You could shoot for a flat profile angle, meaning we're looking from the creature from the side. Now that's not very creative. That does not demonstrate 3D or perspective. But hey, if you're shooting for a C, go for it. I'm going to show you how to do this in 3D mainly. And so remember, just as in anything, we always start with a camera. I'm going to imagine a vanishing point way off the page, and I'm going to start to fan out some lines here. And let's do one going off to a vanishing point off and to the right. And that kind of feels like the ground plane on where this little guy is going to go. I might just do a couple little lines here to give me kind of a feel, just a couple verticals to let me get a feel for where his body's going to be. And let's just build a cylinder, just like you've learned. So looking at the swan's body, that swan's body is a lot like an egg shape. And it's big and puffy in the front, and it gets progressively narrower. So I'm going to bulk this up and pull this down. Imagine where center is. And now let's place a swan's neck in here. So I'm going to do a kind of an S-curve. Now let's go in with this fox head. So remember, I'm not drawing an actual fox's head. I'm drawing the shapes that make up that type of fox head. So one thing I've done, just because that fox head was so huge, because if you look at a swan's head, look how tiny that head is compared to the rest of their neck. Their head is not very heavy. And so this is what is very important about creature design, and that is adapting the forms that you draw so that it makes sense. If we had a huge head and a tiny little body, I need to bulk this neck up in order to make that work. And let's start using some anatomy from this fish. I also really like these legs from this bobcat. We'll look at just the way these front legs look. I'm not going to copy the actual angles, but I can see that on the torso, they're right about here. And then you're going to see how this grid operates. So the legs look like they come back and then down. And here's where the grid comes in handy. Here's where his paw is going to be. And this is where draw through happens. So to know where his other shoulder is going to be, I follow these fan lines that I've made. So I'll draw through, and right about here is where the hidden shoulder is. Here's his elbow. Follow the angle of his other arm. Draw through. There's his elbow. Here's his foot. Follow the angle of his leg. Draw through. And that we'll only see the front part of his limb. The rest of it's all hidden, and we wouldn't have known that had we not drawn through at the shoulder. I really like this kind of implied line that's happening here on this giant nasty fish. And remember, implied line is when your brain sees an edge based on things that are pointing. And so if we see the tips of all of these spikes, that creates an implied line where we can have a fan-like shape, just like this. And so I'm going to create sort of a shape similar to that. Sometimes you'll see me draw an arrow to kind of get an idea of where those shapes are going. So what are these fins going to be? Well, we took the time studying those swan wings. Let's do something similar to that using the anatomy of the fish. All right, let's do a detailing pass. I'm looking at the markings on this little fox, and I kind of want to replicate what's going on there. Kind of saw a little bit of start here. I'm going to kind of follow that same pattern around, say, like the torso of the animal, and let's see what kind of becomes of that. And let's add some little details. So I'm going to use some hatching lines to suggest kind of a rough texture here going on, so that there are these little, just like these quills. We need to differentiate, or in other words, separate the quills from little membranes that are between them. So I'm going to use texture to do that. The quills are straight up and down forms, and the membranes I'm going to have as hatched forms. Now remember, nature is organized chaos. Break your lines. Don't have the same repeating texture stroke that you have. Just don't make it like mechanically the same. Just fill in same distance. Change them up a little bit. And add a little line weight down here to really make that quill pop. But anyway, so that is a summary of the techniques for the form building exercise, creative use of line and texture, and generally putting all of them together, levels 1 through 3 on form building, jamming it all together in one. Hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in class. Bye-bye.